And now I'd like to welcome to the program Małgorzata Bonikowska, political scientist from the University of Warsaw. Hello, and thank you for joining us today on TVP World.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Now, we have a lot going on in Brussels. We just saw Jens Stoltenberg speak as he received a few prime ministers there at NATO headquarters. Of course, there's Ursula von der Leyen in the Security and Defense Forum. And then, of course, the big awaited European Council meeting there in Brussels. It seems, despite the agenda being for the strategic plan for 24 to 29, looks like issues of defense and, of course, Ukraine and Israel are going to be on the top of the agenda. And I'd like to start off by asking you about what Jens Stoltenberg spoke about earlier today, and that was telling NATO members who are not meeting their 2% spending target to not worry about meeting that target, but to actually give as much as they possibly can to Ukraine. Will that message be echoed, do you believe, and discussed and hopefully taken up by other European leaders at the European Council Summit today?
Well, it is really the summit which is very much under the emotions from what we've seen in Israel. I think the European Union countries just realized that the same can happen to Europeans. What just happened to the Israeli, the attack by Iran was, of course, condemned by the Americans and the Europeans, but it does not mean that we feel safer. We really know now that we have to coordinate and cooperate in much better and faster way. So I understand the Stoltenberg's words as just pushing those who had doubts as of now that they have to move on quickly, to put on the table whatever they can very quickly, without just planning, without just discussing, without just, just thinking about money only. Because now we can always be attacked, and we have to take into consideration that the first thinking is the realistic, the feasible ways of being able to protect ourselves.
But just on the back of Don's question in a recent interview with President Zelensky a day or so ago, he said that without aid from the US, Ukraine simply cannot win. So we are gearing up to support Ukraine from Europe here, and there is constant rhetoric, very strong dialogue, and yet it seems that the situation in Ukraine is so dire now that I just wonder whether it's just too late.
Well, this is a question of time and capacities, because, Americans really were giving constantly not only the financial support to Ukraine, but also military support. And as far as the European Union, we were also contributing, actually in the financial terms, maybe even more, but as far as military terms, missiles and all the, drones, etc., European industries are not producing as much as we could have, as quickly as we could, if we were mentally and also in the organizational way in a state of war. We are not. Ukraine is, but Ukraine doesn't have its own capabilities in Ukraine. They are dependent, very much dependent from what they get from all of us. So I think what Zelensky recently said, that there was the missiles attack from Russia, and they were, if I remember correctly, 9 or 11 missiles, but 7 were just killed, destroyed by the Ukrainians, and the rest, unfortunately, were not. They worked very well. They destroyed the targets because Ukrainians simply didn't have the rockets, didn't have the missiles to fight. So this shows how urgent is the situation in Ukraine. And in a larger sense, Ukraine is a battlefield, but it's not only the war between Russia and Ukraine, it's a war between Russia and the West. We are already engaged. So I think putting these two elements together is what is happening in the battlefield, and what we feel as being unsecure for the future, it should work, it should work. The consequence should be a real speed as far as the process of how we produce, what we produce, and how we organize our industries. But if we succeed in this process, and if this process will just be quick enough, it's really hard to tell.
Right, there's a little nuance to that. If we look at Denmark, Denmark has decided to hand over all of its artillery shells because Denmark says, you know what, we don't need them right now. We're not under attack. There's no possible way we could use these, but Ukraine needed them yesterday. We're facing a very similar situation with missile defense. Poland could transfer a Patriot battery over to Ukraine in hopes that the Americans would backfill it, which would most likely be the case. So should European leaders be stepping up to and follow the example of Denmark?
Well, I think so. I think it's a very rational decision because whatever is needed now in Ukraine, and it's not needed right now elsewhere in Europe, should be given to Ukraine. Poland has given everything we had, really. And this is one of the reasons we started to talk with Koreans, that South Korea is ready to deliver very quickly, because they would never stop to be mentally and also as a state, the way how the state is organized, ready to be at war because of the North Korean threat. Europe was not feeling any threat until recently. So we need more time to really speed up with production. So at the moment, we need to use whatever we have, whatever is available, to first help Ukraine, and then in the short term, to help ourselves as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Małgorzata Bonikowska, political scientist from the University of Warsaw. Thank you very much for your insight and for joining us on TVP World.